Great. So thank you all so much for joining us today. I'm going to share my screen. It's loading here. So this is our fourth module of the Training as Action series, a children's rights lens to youth human rights advocacy. So we'll get started with some basic introductions, which we were able to kind of get an early start on a few of them. Then we'll move kind of into our content discussion, a case study, some breakout rooms, and then closing. So I'm going to introduce myself and then turn it over to our facilitators. But while we're all introducing ourselves, if you want to put your name and pronouns, location, role, and organization in the chat so we can get to know all of you a little bit better. So I am Cara. I'm a senior at Albion College based in Michigan. I use she, her pronouns. I'm majoring in political science and English, and I'm a research scholar with Human Rights Educators USA and helping to kind of coordinate this year's Training as Action series. So I'm really happy to be here today. And so Christy, I'll pass it off to you.
Well, welcome everyone. I'm so glad to see you all. I am here in Minnesota on the homelands of the Dakota, and I am, I guess, the Human Rights Educators USA director or co-chair, and have also been a part of the Child Friendly Cities Initiative here in Minneapolis as a couple of the hats that I wear, and will help on the co-facilitation team. Liz, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, my name's Liz. My pronouns are she, hers. I'm currently based in Boston right now because I'm studying at Boston College. I'm an undergraduate, but I'm originally from Long Island, New York. And I'm currently on the executive committee with Christy at HRE USA and the steering committee, and I'm also working on our podcast. Yeah. And I'll pass it to Ari.
Hi everyone, I'm Ari Marucci. I'm a high school history teacher, she, her pronouns, and I started working with HRE about a year ago, a little under a year as a regional rep, and have been trying to collaborate a little more frequently with human rights lesson plans.
Great. Thank you all. Oops, I don't think that slide was important anyways, so it was just going into our content discussion. So whoever was wanting to pick up with our content, take over.
Okay, well, I'll jump in here. Well, thank you all again for being here. And I think we wanted to just give a brief overview of kind of the context of our conversation tonight, and then we'll jump into some of our examples around personal narratives in this advocacy work through the kind of child rights lens, and then kind of close it with some collective actions, but we'll make sure to have time in the middle to learn about what we can do together and how do we actually take action. And so you'll be learning a new kind of pilot tool around the lab that Ari will introduce. So I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the World Program for Human Rights Education. It actually is a program that really is trying to encourage kind of the infusion of human rights education into all sectors of society. And it started back in 2005. And so every 4 years, there's a new kind of theme. I'm happy to say that this fifth phase of the World Program starts in 2005 and is going to be focusing on youth engagement in particular. And a few of the themes that I think, recognize are really important are around kind of the specialized themes of human rights, educational and digital technologies, climate change and the environment, as well as gender equality. Slide. So we really see that youth voice and youth participation are essential into the work that we're doing. And in particular, the Children's Treaty, which It's kind of has a few different names. The UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, which was adopted in 1989, and now is the most ratified treaty in the world, with only one exception of the United States as not having ratified that, although we've signed it. We have, I'm happy to report, done 2 of the optional protocol children's treaties, one on armed conflict, one on human trafficking, but we still need to kind of ratify this larger treaty. So the 3 articles that will kind of uplift here, Article 12 really focuses on the right to be heard. Article 29 talks about the right to education. But today we're going to be really kind of infusing Article 13, although they're all interconnected. But Article 13 really focuses on freedom of expression. And this one really talks about how youth need to be engaged. Young people, children, should be involved in decisions that affect them. And they also need to be able to express themselves in multiple ways, kind of through the multiple intelligences, whether it's written, oral, as well as creative expression, amongst other things. Slide. So in the global context of youth participation, World as it could be has put together that wonderful graphic, I think, that really shows how youth are really interconnected to our entire community. So whether or not we're looking at our classroom setting, whether we're looking at schools, families and caregivers, or the larger community, young people are really central. And we really need to have their voice and their participation in this work. This is kind of a model that really focuses in on social and emotional learning, and then a process that really talks about its multiple dimensions. I'll highlight 3 core contexts of youth participation that I think are central to kind of the work that we're going to be doing today. One is that children's rights have really become prevalent and a research kind of organizing tool, with children participating increasing. So that more and more research is being done around youth participation, and it as being an essential component for really hopefully uplifting young people's rights and responsibilities. We also have seen that through the Circle research that when youth actively participate, that they want to be engaged, but they just don't know enough about what those opportunities are. And so I think communities are challenged in our own sense of how do we really let them know what's available and what opportunities are out there. And finally, we really need young people to be our research partners. So this youth adult partnership model, I think, is really essential. Next. So the overarching arch of human rights really centers on duty bearers, so that responsibilities of governments, as well as then the rights holders, so the children and their care providers. And so we see this as really kind of a balancing act, but really an essential partnership. Next. So this is really, I guess this photo is of our Child Friendly Cities initiative in Minneapolis. I'll be mentioning a bit more after we have our breakout sessions around this kind of collective model. But what we know is that 4 of 5 children think that they could help politicians improve the country. And so if they are consulted, they really feel that they can make a difference. We also know that this is really both an individual and a collective kind of youth-led advocacy effort, that we really need to see them both as kind of young people as individuals, as well as then this team approach that we were discussing. And I think you'll be hearing from our next presenters around kind of the importance of primary resources and storytelling narratives, as well as then how those change makers have really taken action. So this youth-led advocacy effort is essential. And then lastly, we really draw on a number of bodies of child development, service learning, human rights education to really launch into this work. So Liz, do you want to take it from here?
Yeah, sure. So, like Kirsty mentioned, we're kind of gonna dive into some like success stories of like youth leaders who are participating in the human rights education field. So these three individuals are featured in a documentary surrounding youth activism and all of the themes that Christy just outlined. So the film highlights the incredible work of 7 young leaders. We'll be focusing on 3 today, who have used human rights education to make lasting changes in their own communities. The film was created by OHCHR, Amnesty International, and Gokai, and I think it'll be useful to think about strategies to do this work. So, like I said, I'll be focusing on these 3 change makers, Sufyan from Morocco, Dejana Stosic from Serbia, and Irfan Manjura from South Africa. So all of their projects kind of represent innovative approaches to addressing critical issues in human rights, from defining masculinity to combating gender-based violence, and like mobilizing youth for systemic change. And this past summer, I interned at OHCHR, and I had the honor of meeting 2 of these 3 change makers, and helped organize an event with them, which we can also share with you guys later. So let's dive into their stories. This slide. So the first one is Sufyan. Like I said before, he's a trailblazing advocate for gender justice in Morocco specifically. Another fun fact is that he's a doctor in molecular biology at the Faculty of Medicine and Pharmacy in Casablanca. But his primary focus is rethinking masculinity in a society where traditional norms often stifle progress. So, to address this, he created a podcast called Mashi Rajola, and it challenges harmful stereotypes and promotes positive masculinities. So the podcast promotes positive masculinity, as I said, and aims to rethink it in a patriarchal society through a feminist lens. So through like different candid conversations and also expert insights and interviews, Sufyan has kind of opened up a space for Moroccan men and women to question like ingrained gender roles in their society and embrace more equitable ones. So he often explains that the podcast can really resonate with young people around his age and even younger, because it offers a platform for dialogue in a digital form that wasn't always there before, it didn't always exist before, and wasn't super accessible for everyone before. So he has also done some work with Intersections, which is a platform for advocating for legal reforms to protect personal freedoms in Morocco too. So he kind of brought this local project to a larger level as well. And I think that Sufyan's story really exemplifies how digital tools like a podcast can really amplify voices and create change within the youth activism context, even in challenging social environments. And I think it kind of just sets a really good example of how education can happen in unconventional ways, but also be very, very impactful. So next slide. So next we're going to turn to Dejana. So she is an educator and an activist from Serbia whose work primarily focuses on gender-based violence. So she co-founded a program called SOS Girls Corner. And what it does, it provides a safe space for girls to share their stories and access different resources and also find support when like either after dealing with some gender-based violence or just to learn more about how to combat it. So one effective method of inspiring young individuals to get involved in human rights education is by demonstrating what it means and what it entails. So in a lot of her events, she clarifies what the human rights are, what people's what people have in regards to human rights and kind of illustrating what they can accomplish through them is like the primary goal of her project. So they have different weekly meetings and they come together and they talk in a room together with one another. And this project and initiative won the Within Four Girls Award in 2020 and has really just become a super successful way to empower women, especially young women in Serbia. She also really honed in on the digital platform and digital activism as well. So she made waves in 2021 with her hashtag campaign, which the hashtag translates to I didn't report. And she shared her personal reasons for not reporting sexual violence. And this act and this post inspired over 21,000 other women in just 3 days to share their own stories. And this campaign kind of brought national attention in Serbia to the prevalence of unreported violence and like other systemic barriers that survivors are facing. So she often emphasized in the film and just in general the importance of storytelling as like a healing tool and also for advocacy. And she's also highlighted that like the importance of these programs is that they become more than just that. It also is a way to foster solidarity and also give survivors a voice, even if it's in an informal setting, like a classroom, like you can see in the picture there. That's her meeting with some of the girls who are in the group with her. And just a current update. So she's currently working as a youth educator as well and a peace activist. And right now she's actually fighting against nationalistic rhetoric and the glorification of war criminals as well. So she kind of has a wide range of projects, but Girls Corner has really been like the cornerstone of a lot of her work. So we could go to the next one. So finally, we have Irfan Monjera. So he is from South Africa. He's also a youth activist, and he has really dedicated his work to youth empowerment. So he has been working on a project, and he's the youth activism program manager at the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation. So through this initiative, he has organized over like 30 different youth clubs focused on a variety of different issues. This includes climate justice, anti-racism within South Africa specifically, and also just general human rights education for his community. So the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation, it essentially, the purpose of it is to work and develop and promote different values and rights and principles, especially those within the Freedom Charter and the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa against racism, since that's a very prevalent issue, especially for youth. So essentially what the youth club means is that he organizes different seminars and different lectures. He also hosts different debates and discussions with youth. So in that picture there, you can see one of the like roundtable discussions that he held. And he's also doing some research on issues that promote like non-sexist, non-racial, and like democracy in general in South Africa. So he's kind of using a bunch of different activities within these youth activist clubs that really get a bunch of a wide range of ages involved as well. So he has often shared within the film and then just in general again, like how the coalition has mobilized people across the country in South Africa to tackle critical issues for like I said, ranging from like mental health to civic engagement. He actually recently just did a youth like climate justice project. So for example, he did lectures on the intersection of environmental rights and social justice. So again, like a wide range of different topics within these youth groups. So I think that his work in general really shows how like structured and community-based programs can really empower people to lead change. He has a really great ability to connect local efforts to national movements, like the South African principles. And right now, he's currently serving on a variety of different boards, including the advisory board of the Youth Climate Champions Project. And he also was recently appointed by the premier provincial government to the youth advisory panel. And he has served on a number of different committees in his country, in his community, and also within student and youth organizations. So again, really like connecting these local level projects to national level involvement through advisory committees or other positions and things like that. So in conclusion, so I think each of these three change makers, we can go to the next slide also. They each kind of demonstrate how young people can really lead transformative projects when they have the right tools and platforms and the passion that they all have. So like we saw, Sufyan, he used podcasts to spark dialogue about positive masculinity in Morocco, and he really created a safe space for young people to challenge societal norms. Then we saw Dejana, who had her grassroots programs and like social media campaigns that really got involved thousands to speak out against gender-based violence in Serbia. And then we had Irfan, who empowers youth in South Africa by building coalitions and different educational initiatives that address a variety of issues from climate justice to civic rights. So I think in general, their work really highlights how youth participation is not just about being heard, but also like taking active leadership and shaping projects within your own communities, whether that's having like different panels and different lessons with like 4 or 5 people, or if that means having a seat on the youth like national advisory board. So I kind of had 3 different takeaways that I am also excited to hear your takeaways as well, which we'll get to in our small groups. But the first one I had was that education is a really powerful tool for empowerment, but it doesn't always look like a classroom. So it can be a podcast, it can be a social media campaign, it can be a local youth club. What matters a lot of the times is that it's tailoring to the needs of the community that the person is in. And then the second one I kind of pulled out was that collaboration strengthens impact. So if you notice or look back, none of these change makers really worked in isolation or really worked by themselves. A lot of the time, successful projects work with local organizations, local youth actors, global networks, and peers to really amplify their reach. And I think that also really demonstrates the power of like, collective action in general. And then lastly, I kind of touched on this before, but I think another emerging strategy that they all used was focusing on local change in their own communities to eventually bring that to a larger impact. And that definitely doesn't always have to be the route that you take. But for them, it was a really successful strategy to get more than just like local level impact and go to the national level or go to global change and beyond. So I can also share the link to the Changemakers film. So like I said, these are just 3 of the individuals, but there's also 4 others who have done amazing, very inspiring youth activism work. So I'll paste that into the chat here. If anyone wants to watch it, you can also, oh, I just saw here. If anyone wants it now, there it is. But it's really great too because you can watch individual stories, but you can also watch the entire film. So each individual story is like 7 minutes. And I think it's a really great way to take inspiration from their stories and to continue building. And we also had a event with 2 of the change makers, like I said, last year, I think it was last spring, with TAAS. And I'm also going to paste that link to the recording. If you're interested in hearing them speak and answer questions, it also could be a really great resource. Yeah, and just another thing, I think one thing that's really great about these change makers in particular is just how much enthusiasm and like passion they had, and you can really sense that in the documentary and the videos, but also I think in this work. And I know that they're very exceptional, but I think it's also important to remember that like any type of change can also happen on a smaller scale, like I said. Doesn't have to be like 20,000 posts like Dejana had. And today we're hoping that we can all work on these skills together with you all, and we hope that the stories like got you thinking about what role you might play or what strategies you can pull from this and what might work best in your community as well. So going off that, I'll pass it to Ari.
Thank you, Liz. That was very inspiring. And it lines up perfectly with where I'm coming from. So again, I'm a high school history teacher, but I'm also the faculty advisor for our school's chapter of Amnesty International. And what I've noticed since the pandemic with my students, well, first of all, I'm in a very rural area and we don't have a lot of money. I'm in upstate New York, in Dowsville, which is near Utica. So we're very small. We don't have a lot of diversity. And when we came back from being shut down for over a year, like disrupted education and whatnot, as I'm sure many of you experienced as well, I noticed that my students seemed very apathetic and hopeless. So one of my goals in the last few years here is to show them that through action, they can make a difference, maybe for themselves, maybe for the community, maybe for the whole world. So I developed a lab model, and you're seeing on the screen right now the first page. So if I was to use what Liz was describing with the videos or the information about those 3 change makers, you would put the title of the source that you're using with your students. And I would have each student look at the source, write down 3 key facts for each source, and then hopefully they can do a little bit of an analysis and see what the limitations of each source might be. Yeah, we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. And LAB stands for Leadership, Action, and Bravery. Like I said, I'm trying to show students that they can make a difference in their community. So we would analyze each source. Who is leading? How are they leading? Who is taking action? How are they taking action? Who's being brave? How are they being brave? And sometimes it's individuals, sometimes it's groups, organizations, government. So really this lends itself to any topic connected to human rights. And the last piece, you can see here it says make your claim. I just did a sample question with this one. How did leaders and organizations play a role in the movement for children's rights? And let me put the link to one of the articles here for you. In the chat, you should be able to get to one of the articles that I would use. And then, to be honest with you, I would take Liz's information and I would revamp the whole thing, because the videos are so, for students especially, so inspiring to see all of that. And you can adapt this, Chuck, I see your question. You can adapt this for any grade level. I talked to elementary teachers at the National Social Studies Conference last week, and you can adjust it for any grade level. And I would use this with my seniors that I teach. I would just adjust it a little bit. So it's really, you can develop it for any grade level. You can do it with your community organization and just have your group examine how people are making change. Any other questions about that model? And is there anything else you want me to add, Christy, about that?
Ashley, did you have a question? Or were you going to say something?
I was just wondering, I was interested in the question about who's being brave, how are they being brave? And I'm wondering what comes of that or how your students respond to that question. I like that question. So interested to hear more.
Yeah, a lot of the times they are surprised that taking action works. That's what I'm noticing the most is, and that's what the work with Amnesty International really hits home with them too, because they see the success stories that Amnesty sends information out to you for. And like they almost don't believe it because it seems like every which way they turn right now, the world is on fire, right? And they feel so hopeless. But once they see these examples, it does ignite a little spark in them. I have to say, it's really great to see. And I would tweak things a little bit depending on each group because you know your students the best, but it really does help them see that you can make a difference, even just one person. Did that help? Okay. Anything else?
Thanks, Adriana. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
And
Well, and I think you've kind of created a whole tool chest, I guess, of additional resources. So I think you've brought out an example of, although you have case studies yourself that are written case studies. I think Liz has showed us how you can integrate video. I dropped in the chat to the podcast example. So we do have, our Human Rights Education Now podcast. So I think the idea of both those stories, or they can go out and even kind of interview others about their stories or even their peers. Like, when have you actually taken action and what does it look like? And I think your critique is wonderful. Do you want to mention a little bit more about, I guess initially you might have started with kind of a gender
All right. So yeah, this all started
lessons
with the National Women's History Museum. I submitted this lesson plan to their website. So the first one that I did was about Black women's clubs and women's suffrage. And I realized that that was just a topic that I didn't learn very much about women's suffrage anyway in my general schooling before I went to college. And I didn't learn anything about Black women's clubs. So I'm figuring if I didn't learn about it and I'm a history major and I went to school for it, then there's a lot of people that haven't heard about it. So I created a lesson plan. That one was, instead of saying like the Human Rights Lab, it would be Women's Rights Lab. So you can adjust this for any topic you want. And it does lend itself to a variety of source work, like you mentioned. You can bring in any type of source with this, depending on what your ultimate goal is. For a high school course, we need to be able to write and critique. So we would do a whole essay. This example where it says make your claim, one paragraph, that would be more 7th, 8th grade, 6th grade to work on paragraph structure. But if you're using it in a community organization, it can just be to show people how other people have taken action. You don't have to write anything if you don't want to. And in the folder too, there's a blank template where you can fill in what you would want to put there. So if you access the folder that we have shared with everybody, you can see a blank template and you can also see the one that's on the screen right now as an example.
Danielle, did you have something to share?
Well, the only thing that I was going to share is the comment that I appreciate being provided accessible and immediate use resources as a teacher. I think that it's great to have these conversations about what we should do and how we should do it, but like, I'm also a teacher with limited time and resources. So like, hand that to me. I love you for doing that. That's wonderful. I wanted to send my thanks for giving me the platform to just like immediately go for it. That's wonderful.
Thank you very much. I feel your pain and that's why I did it this way.
Well, and we were going to tease this up, but I think maybe you should mention kind of the initial pilot now, Ariana, if you want to,
Through
around,
HRE, you mean?
uh-huh.
Right, so now we've decided, as of last week, to pilot this on the HRE website. So we will have a whole, it's collaboration, right? LAB. So showing people how to take action with all sorts of human rights topics. And many thanks to Christy for allowing me to do this. I think it's going to be a game changer for teachers, among others.
And so if also there's anyone here who's created lessons or has been working with youth activists in their own sphere, I mean, we can then they can create their own space kind of Google folder. And then this will be kind of, as we called it, the collaborative lab being in there, collaborative project, so that we'll have others, I guess somebody who did a cartoon exercise about how do you use cartoons to kind of get youth activists going through the HRE lens. And so being able to have those resources too, because I think there's so much material out there that right now we need to just figure out how can we make some simple
Right. And
steps
we talked to
together.
another teacher. She has a whole women's rights unit that she wants to share with us. So speaking to what Danielle mentioned, we just want to create a hub of resources that are ready to go.
And I'll mention a couple things that we do also have. Oh, go ahead, Danielle.
I'm sorry. The only reason I keep unmuting myself is because I don't know how to use the hand raise signal. I've messed up with that before, even though I taught through COVID. Regardless, I'm just wondering what the best way to try and share materials that we think might be beneficial to the HRE platform. What is the process for that?
I think I'll put my email here, but I think it will be we are going to be kind of with Ari, we'll both be kind of looking at how to get some of those materials into this right now, Google shared space, so that if you're interested, you should send us just an email and say, hey, you want to be a part of the lab pilot? And then you'll be connected. It's we're very simple, that we want more people, to be able to come into this process and be able to share and feel like you're not alone out there trying to do your work. And I think we have the K-12 lesson library, and sometimes that can be when you can plug in and you can get lessons to download. But this way, there's also both kind of current events, as things change, and you feel like it's a little bit more dynamic when you can kind of work with people in the process. And I know Maddie's on here, but she's worked with young people around Nobel Peace Prize laureates, and that's a different movement, but how she's created kind of these ebooks around the different laureates, whether it's Malala or Kalash from the Children's Rights, who received the Children's Rights Awards, to many others. And she also has worked hard for this Child Friendly Cities initiative to even just do the simple slide deck, how do we begin kind of these actions? So I'm glad, Danielle, you think that this is a useful tool and space that you'd like to be involved in. Maybe should we move to the next step of kind of our breakout area? And Liz, do you want to facilitate the kind of themes?
Sure. Yeah. So for our breakout rooms, we were thinking about putting all of this to practice and have you guys kind of talk through some things that you're passionate about. So we'll take some of the lab questions and send them to the different groups, and we'll share a document with everyone so you can take notes together within your small group. So for this, we were interested in hearing what you all are interested in talking about and exploring. And what issues are you currently thinking about? Are there any key themes or key topics that have come up during this presentation or also elsewhere that you would be interested in exploring. You can also keep in these 3 themes in mind, but they could also be things like climate justice, gender equality, really whatever you prefer. So if you have any ideas, if you guys want to send it in the chat, we can kind of see what you're all thinking and then section up into breakout rooms based on that. Or you can also, if you have any ideas, you can also just say them out loud, or you don't have to send them in the chat as well. Does anyone have any preferences? If not, we can also assign based on ones that we had as well.
I'd like to go to number 2. I can't remember the title for it, but it seemed appropriate.
Okay, so campaigning and advocacy strategies.
Yeah, yeah.
Wonderful. Is there anyone else who would like to join in on that group? We can do 3 different groups. We can do 2 groups of 3 and 1 group of 4, if that works for everyone. But does anyone else want to join in on the campaigning and advocacy strategies conversation? Maddie, okay, perfect. And then we need 1 more for that one. Okay, Danielle, perfect. And then does anyone else have any other ones? If not, we can do barriers to expression. Okay, we can do barriers to expression. Is anyone interested in taking that one on? Okay, Ashley, perfect. Okay, great. That's so we have 2, and then we just need 1 more.
Ashley, and who else was in that
Oh,
for the barriers?
Me.
yes.
Mireya.
Sorry,
Mireya.
everyone's
Oh,
moving.
thank you. Sorry. I'm looking at the list. Okay. Thanks.
Perfect. And then let's see. Samantha, Yvonne, Corinne, do either of you guys want to join that group as well?
I'm okay in any group.
Okay, great.
They all looked interesting.
Okay, perfect. Let's see. Oh, did we lose someone? I think we only have 12 now. Okay, so maybe so Yvonne, Samantha, and Corinne, do you want to do the last group upholding a role in decision making? Christy, do you think that works?
Yes, I'm just,
Okay.
I
think
think
that-
we've got it.
Okay.
Perfect. And so just remember your rooms and your titles. I think we'll
Yes.
push you all out.
Yes,
now.
and Christy, I believe, sent the document that you can all take notes on. It would probably be a good idea to assign 1 note taker. And then, so we'll take notes in the document and then we'll come back all together and discuss everything. And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to send it in the chat or we'll be here.
Great.
Are you sending the document that you want us to take notes in first, or?
It's in the chat, the very first document that I shared
Oh, got it.
up
Thank
above the.
Thank you.
Are you gonna join?
Yes, I
A group?
can. Are we each going
Actually,
in?
you know what? I was putting you in the last one. Do you want to go in with Chuck so we're not just a Minnesota group?
Sure.
Okay, move to room.
Oh, and then how much time did we?
Okay, How are we doing time-wise? That's a good question.
We're at 48. So we originally had,
I think 7:05, and since it's a smaller group, should we just let people have a little bit of time to just 15 minutes, do you think?
yeah, I think that's good. And then come back for 15 and then
So, yeah,
25.
so I'll close broadcast. Do I give people a minute? Nope, I'll just close
Okay.
rooms at 7:05, and then we've got 15, we'll do maybe 10 minutes of, or 15, and then we can close in 5. Okay,
Okay, great. All right. I will join.
thanks. I
See
will
you.
too. Go for it.
All right. So we had some great points made. Let me go back to my note sheet. We had an interesting group, actually. We had Ashley, who is working with 150 organizations and schools. So she's right in the thick of it doing the work. And who else was with me? Kara and, am I saying your name right? Mireya? Is that right?
Yes, Mireya. Yes.
Mireya. She's just wanting to learn more, which, you know, as a teacher, I love. And Kara is also right in the thick of it at the college level. And we had some specific requests, which I also love. We definitely need more resources, more ready-to-go docs that can be printed because, and I'm glad Ashley brought this up, not everyone has access to internet. And I remember when we had to do our teaching with the shutdown, we had quite a few students that didn't have internet access, so things need to be printed. So the goal, like we said earlier, is to have the folders for you all, and you can print whatever from the folder that you want. And some specific issues are gender equity and domestic violence issues. So that's what we discussed. Team 2, would you like to go?
I vote that Danielle goes. Danielle, do you mind? Because it's really your idea.
Well, I'm not so sure about that. I feel like it came out of the conversation that we were having. But if you're speaking to my very grandeur idea of creating, bringing in Chrissy's idea of maybe creating a museum for the human rights of a child, and what I think would be just so impactful for both adults and children is to have an interactive experience in that. Like, why can't we create a museum in which we walk into a playground of sorts and we get to choose the paths of which we take, and we see how that either does or doesn't lend itself to these ideas of human rights that we are trying to advocate for, and rather just to just teach people in general about human rights education. I hope I didn't botch it too badly. I'm sorry, Maddie, if I ruined that, but that was my idea. Is like, if we want our children to be involved, then I think that we need adults to get involved in a child's thinking. We need to reconfigure and reground ourselves with the innocence and the just like open-mindedness of our children. Why would we not want to do that? I don't need to tell you what to think. I want you to choose which path you think would be best and to find the outcome. What does that look like? And it's okay if the outcome doesn't look like what we wanted it to, because we can learn from that. I don't know what that would look like, but I think that would be so cool.
So we were very much inspired by Danielle's recent trip to a museum, and it reminded me, Christy, of your long-held desire and just the role, like Danielle said, of how young people, I think also inspired by what Liz shared about, change makers and how young people could lead this effort at many ages.
Exciting. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to be on a call because we're talking about also first, like even mapping out what kind of human rights related museums are across our country. But then how do we look at things, differently or create spaces? So I love your ideas. Thank you. Should we jump in, Corinne or Samantha? Do you want to share? It kind of, it's maybe linked to a museum, but kind of out on the streets.
Well, I think Samantha has a better grasp on the issue.
Mhm.
If you wouldn't mind, Samantha.
Nope. I think you're muted if you're trying to speak. Or maybe you're not able to. Oh, there you are.
Hi, I'm so
Thanks.
sorry.
No worries.
Just give me one moment. Sorry,
No, you're
just had
good.
to handle something. So we kind of were talking about how like policymakers can affect how students see themselves and kids in general. So I personally work with Black and Brown children in one of the poorest districts in Los Angeles. And we kind of started this new unit where we were talking about what's the difference between graffiti and street art. And when I posed the question to my students, the first thing they said as Black and Brown children was the color of your skin. Not where they're from, not where they're like doing the art, anything like that. It was the color of our skin dictates whether it's graffiti or if it's street art. And it brings up like this really good argument, like not argument, but like idea that policymakers make laws that directly affect the children and kind of how they see themselves and how they think human rights dictates to them. Because even as children, they're having this big idea that they are criminalized because of the color of their skin rather than like these actions. And it's so deeply ingrained. And even like I've seen like my students explain to policymakers like, hey, like this is how like I see myself and like how I see like actions I take. And only then do policymakers realize like something that they thought was like helping their community is really like affecting the self-image of children, which then in turn is how they show up into spaces. When we say, hey, let's talk about human rights, they don't see it as, oh, I have human rights because I'm a person. They see it as I don't have rights because I'm Black and brown and I'm a child. So it's really hard to engage them in these conversations about human rights when they already view themselves as criminal for just existing and already believe like they shouldn't have these basic rights that everyone is granted.
So then one of the ideas that we were discussing is something that's actually already done. I live in Tucson, and something that we've already kind of done here is, and there is going to be some issues with implementation in some areas. There was a crackdown on vandalism in Tucson. It was about 10 years ago. And it very quickly became apparent that it was disproportionately affecting the Hispanic neighborhoods. That most of the kids that were being charged with vandalism were Latino. And pretty quickly the city council backtracked on, okay, well, this is not going to work. So while they were quick to charge children with vandalism, the punishment changed. Everyone across the spectrum, Black, brown, and white, are being charged the same with vandalism, but now there's a diversion program. Your record will be wiped and you will go out and paint murals. So now the city is covered in beautiful murals. You can Google murals of Tucson. They are everywhere. It's part of a beautification of Tucson. The kids can put it on their resumes. They have no records. And and actually vandalism has gone down. So I guess in my mind, that's something that could be an idea. There are significant barriers. You'd have to get the legislature on board because this is a diversion program and legislatures don't often like diversion programs. And there is, from what I'm understanding from Samantha, there does sound like there's some internalized self-loathing that's been caused by kind of this structural violence that's been in place for a long time because of the actions of the legislature, and that's going to take a long time to correct. And a diversion program is not the only thing that's going to be needed to fix that. You're going to need a lot of other interventions, not just a diversion program. Okay, you're not going to be in all this horrible trouble because you tagged a McDonald's. You're going to paint this cactus, and then you're not going to be in trouble anymore. But that's not going to fix it. That's going to fix this second of it. That's not going to fix the whole thing. That's just going to fix this particular issue of it. And I don't know how far that would go to changing both the self-image and then the greater image. But I think any movement on this kind of issue is progress. But that may be naive of me.
Well, I'm really, I of course love murals and have worked with young people. And I do think that as both of you have been talking, I mean, I think it would be great to see some models of what has been done in Tucson. And I think Samantha was mentioning that there may be one that's similar in LA proper. And then yet as you go out to the next, the next tier areas, like I think Watts or where she's working, you don't have that. And I think that we have some of that, the same thing out in like the rural communities. How do we try and have things that are reaching far and wide and with kind of the different communities. I'll mention and something that we're going to be doing with this. So I'm working with someone who's right now kind of considered the executive director of, or is the executive director of the American Indian Movement's Interpretive Center. So the American Indian Movement started in the Twin Cities. And so we're going to be having, working with our AIM Indigenous elders and having young people come and document their stories and looking at some of the legacy artifacts. But we've wanted to then put down legacy markers to recognize kind of some of these historical spaces and places around. It's youth-led spaces. And I can say oh wait, who's
yes,
in Nashville?
I meant to mention that.
Oh, that's great.
That sense of community.
Yeah.
I was forgetting something, creating sense of community.
Well, it is. And I was in Jackson, Mississippi, because they back 10 years ago had worked with kind of college students or, to do mapping out of their civil rights trek. And then they created then kind of these markers around where things are. So, I think that maybe there's opportunities to kind of reframe the narrative, around resilience in, our communities that are feeling so targeted. And I know that around LA's in particular, Samantha, I mean, there has been pushes to have like the city resolutions and kind of passing resolutions in support of this children's treaty, the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And so then, you kind of bring teeth to it by asking around, well, what are you doing to put money, or create these opportunities for young people to be artists or provide their voices on city councils and the boards, or to, kind of the jobs working here or there. So I don't know, but I like the idea of trying to figure out how we can map some of these, these folks these young people who are trying to make make the change, or who are really struggling and thinking about it. And then how do we become mentors or supports to them? I don't know, Samantha, what would be most helpful for you? I mean, I appreciate you sharing your example because I think it's real and you know, it gets to, I think Ari started us off saying, hey, this is hard. How do we get our students who are feeling so down and disengaged, engaged?
I think at least for like the community I work in, it's gonna be like a long fight because we have to like not only like make them realize like, hey, like when you redirect things and fight for what you believe in, it can cause great good, but also just build up a whole community, including their parents' like um self-confidence and just identity, since there is this big like even with the parents of like, how can I support my children when I like when I'm dark skinned, and like, is it my fault for bringing my child into this situation? And I think like a lot of that is kind of like what um Danielle said in chat, is like creating these community oriented spaces that are very much youth led, where it's like, instead of us like shaming like them tagging things, being like, look at this is beautiful, and being like, our kids are so talented, and just because it's not like a profession, like quote unquote professional type of art, that doesn't mean it's not art, and that it could be a professional type of art if we take away the stigma that tagging is only done by gang members, or that tagging is only done by African American or Latino men, when in reality, like 15% of women, 15% of taggers are women. And most of these tags, like people don't realize they're tags when you walk down the street. They look like murals because they're so well done and they're so beautiful. So I think creating these community, especially youth-led spaces where they're able to just express themselves in any means possible would be amazing. And I know that there's some places where they do have like, they call them like tagging spaces, where it's just like, it started off as like just 3 walls, but the youth, like the youth community goes and like they just tag, and like, and then like I think like some of them are like every like once a year or so they'll like repaint all the walls white so that the kids have a fresh space to tag once again. And I think these community spaces where even leveraging them, so there's other conversations happening where it's like, well, what do you guys think would happen if we offered like we did like a focus of art where we're focusing on like genocides, for example, so that it's like they're able to use their art to also express themselves about other movements happening and like get the community involved. But like really letting the kids kind of just control that area and like make it an area where it's like, this is for the community, but it is for the community's children to come and be themselves.
I just think that sounds so cool. Like, what if there was the ability to allow students throughout the year to continuously create through their artistic minds, like their understanding of the social justice or human rights oriented content that they're gathering in each unit, and like how can they artistically show that, and then at the end of the year, like to be able to bring that all together in a mural of their choice. Like, what stood out to you? I don't know. Gosh, my mind just rumbles with all of these things. I think it sounds so cool. And I'm so sorry to take up too much space, but like Samantha and Corinne, I love it. That's so cool.
Yeah, I love all this discussion. I don't want to interrupt all this great conversation, but I did throw in the chat a couple links, one to a survey on the session. It's really helpful for us if you can fill that out. Helps us kind of evaluate the session and adjust things going forward. There's also a link there to Human Rights Day celebration that'll be happening on December 10th through HRE USA virtually as well. If there's any final words our facilitators have as well.
I will actually, I think you'll see the slide deck, because I did have more information on kind of the Child Friendly Cities initiative. So I think if people are thinking about how do you look at collective kind of collaboration within your own communities, or how are you, reaching out to legislatures, I mean, feel free to reach out to me and I'm happy to share. And I know that there'll be UNICEF USA is going to be having some pilots to try and figure out what cities or places may be right for trying to have this. I will note that right now, UNICEF globally in Afghanistan has switched to child-friendly spaces. So it kind of makes me think about what we're talking about here of third spaces and how do we create different ways of being, knowing, doing. And I don't know, I guess I'll throw this out. I mean, HRE USA, we are trying to map out some of these existing museums, thinking about this more creative space. So if anyone is interested in kind of continuing this conversation a little further and a deeper dive, I mean, feel free to reach out to me, and we will be pulling together kind of a group of thinking through what can we do, what are possibilities, because we do have a couple of board members, new steering committee members who are in museums. One is at the Anne Frank Museum in Idaho, and others have done some of this work. But I think, and I dropped Marissa's name in there, and she had run an organization for a number of years with young people called Arte, which was doing a lot of what we're talking about, this arts and the resistance, and doing murals even in prisons in New York. So I think this has me inspired. So maybe we can just go, and Liz, I think you wanted to say a few things, but maybe we can go around, and if there's any last, after you speak, if there's other words that people want to say, what they're taking away, we'll definitely be following up with you after this too.
Yeah, they were quick. We actually also mentioned a lot of them, but just within HRE USA. So Christy shared the link to the podcast before, but we have some more stories of youth activists. If you were interested in listening, I can also paste the link again. And also, Cara had also mentioned this, but on December 10th, we have our Human Rights Day celebration. It's from 4 to 5 Eastern time. We would love for you all to join us and bring the same passion. And then also, this is on the slides as well, but just keep an eye out for future TAAS sessions. The series is going to pick up again on February 10th, so just keep an eye out for that. The flyer for future sessions is also in the slides, but I'll hand it back to Christy.
Oh, actually, Ari, do you want to say anything?
Just a big thank you, and keep doing the work that you're doing. I definitely am inspired from all of your stories and your hard work.
Yeah.
And the kids need you, so keep it up. Thank you.
Yes. And be well. And if anyone else is feeling like they want to throw anything out here, we'll stay on for a few minutes. But thank you so much for being here and all that you're doing in your communities to keep hope going. We're with you.